Welcome one and all to the second game of 2024 and the iconic opening setup of the board. This is going to be another different setup team-wise, another team game and an educational game. So Chris and I are on opposite teams again. I will be manning the Axis, or more appropriately quarterbacking the Axis team, whereas Chris has the Allies. With Simone and Brian, and Roman and Ferris are with me on the Axis team. Chris and I are going to do our best to kind of hold back and do some quarterbacking and guidance as opposed to running the team and telling people where to push stuff. So there's going to be some shared decision making here as we walk our young comrades through the glory and beauty of the world's most intriguing strategy or board game, Axis and Allies Global 1940. Here it comes. Beginning of turn 2, the Americans have gathered their forces at Hawaii, but you'll see didn't build much anything. Well, actually, I don't think anything back there to support them, and we'll see why momentarily. The Anzacs not having the opportunity to do a whole heck of a lot yet, other than, of course, gather some free IPCs from some Java. Indians have kind of stepped back, not feeling the need to focus on Southeast Asia. And while building a few things, have sent their navies over to Africa to get all up in Italy's grill, together with their British compadres. And we're pretty aggressive about doing that. We see a traditional Taranto, and that's the remnants of that. And of course, Italy's had a chance to come back. So we've had a couple of exchanges of both good and bad rolls. Britain's invasion of Tobruk went all sorts of bad. They did some pretty poor rolling on the invasion, were forced to retreat back into Alexandria. Italy decided to take advantage of that situation by bringing a bomber and all the infantry and land units and whatnot that it could into Alexandria with over 90% odds, rolled whiffs and hit nothing, and every single unit in Alexandria hit back. So that just pissed away all of the advantage that Italy otherwise had in that situation, and now Africa is looking bleak going forward here. We swung the Navy over to take care of the cruiser and the transport that was there, because that was its highest and best use for a Navy that was going to die one way or another pretty soon, given the state of the rolling. But that's not all for Italy. They did manage to somehow take Greece without dying. That's impressive. But they sent a sizable force into southern France and got duly repelled. I'm not sure, did they kill? No, they killed nothing after 2 or 3 rounds of combat, but lost a couple pieces and decided to pull back what was left. So that's just not an auspicious start for the Axis. France has done what it does, is be annoying for as long as possible, and that certainly continues as we spill forward into round 2. Halfway through turn 2, Japan continues its conquest of mainland China, proceeding thusly and using its large air force to wipe out the small stack that had been in Shenxi, leaving just the one here so far. On the European map, Germany has started things rolling by declaring war on Russia, even though it only occupied a few of the border territories. That was still enough to get the Russians into strategic withdrawal and building up some mad huge stacks there in Belarus and elsewhere. Stepping back from Leningrad for the time being anyway. The Germans, having bought 10 mechs and moved everything up to the front, have quite a bit to show on the border. Starting to move in that direction. Some tanks and mechs zooming back from Paris, while the Germans, having taken 2 of the 3 border territories so far that the French took, just southern France, they're waiting to see what Italy does with it. And in anticipation of Allied moves here. On the rest of the turn, we see Germans kind of consolidating a fleet, the British hanging out in Iceland to preserve their ships and keep them out of the range of the submarine hordes, and just waiting for the chance for these Americans to launch. Will it be turn 2? So as we roll into turn 3, we see an American fleet that's just kicking it in Hawaii, holding station there with nothing coming after it, because the Americans, as we've seen, are pouring everything they've got into the Atlantic. Anzac doing what it can, and it's quite a bit when it's not at war. Those 3 money islands that it owns now are just way too much, and that's unfortunate, but we'll see what happens there. In the rest of the world, at Calcutta, just content to sit there and hold the fort down while the British economy just throws everything it can into Africa, and that's quite a bit. Having now wiped out the Italian Navy, essentially, we have a factory and a airstrip in Egypt, so that they will be kicking out naval units and protecting them with scrambles for the foreseeable future. The Italians just being chased into Tunisia with really no hope of accomplishing anything other than a few more minutes of survival. With now the British joining the Americans in North America, just cooking until they're allowed to take off and come back. The Germans doing what they can to push forward on the Russian front. The French doing far more than is expected of them, killing more Italians than could ever really be expected of anybody, just hitting roll after roll. But Italy finally has Southern Europe at least to show for it. And there's a whole lot of carnage anticipated in Russia in the coming turn. Halfway through turn 3, Japan has positioned itself for the coming expansion of the war in the way it best knows how, with our kill China first strategy, crafted by your own Mr. Ferris, has been working out pretty well. We're pretty happy with the results. We have all but 2 of the Chinese territories gobbled up now, with that one stack in Xinjiang, I believe it is, just looking at a oncoming horde of rising sun flags and thinking, why did I get into this business? In the meantime, we've positioned ourselves a bit down in the south with some transport capability, kind of rounding out that fleet down there, having 2 proper fleets now to project some power and create some options. On the Russian front, Russia continues its strategic repositioning while punching back a bit at western Ukraine, which the Germans had taken. That was the only territory that it retook, because the Germans have pushed forward into Leningrad, but primarily down on this end of the board. That's just a whole mess of Germans in those 2 stacks there, primarily in eastern Poland, but also a fair number in Bessarabia. And Russia retrenched into, what is that, Bryansk? Mm-hmm. Bryansk, yeah, with all of its units, and those greens are 10 each, so that's 36 infantry alone, let alone everything else. So that's just a walking kill box, as you expect, but that's how it's panning out so far. Little German fleet there with a wolf pack now, hanging out in the English sea zone, waiting for the rest of turn 3. It's that critical turn 4 time. So, again, keeping station here, and not a lot of Pacific action happening. The real hero of the Pacific this turn is Anzac, who had the temerity to declare war in an unprovoked manner on Japan. That's uncalled for. But it did get 30-something in bonuses as a result, or 30-something total after bonuses. So that's always an offensive number for the Australians to collect. And look at what they're doing with it, building that aggressive and offensive fleet, completely uncalled. I find it offensive, for one. Calcutta, I don't know, they probably did something. I think they bought guys or something. That's about it. But the rest of the Brits continuing their slow gobbling of Africa. This whole industrialization of Egypt is going crazy with these ships and building. Did you build anything there? You built some stuff, I assume, with your pointer.
Those two guys. And don't obviously forget we also built.
Well, sure. They've completed the conquest of the Middle East, building a military factory there, a military base rather, and positioning quite a few planes in the area. So now they're getting those bonuses as well. So UK, Europe economy, unfortunately humming. Italians holding on, trying to stretch out their occupation there for as long as possible to deny them that victory token. While in the interim, we have just more and more Brits piling up, waiting to join their American forces. The Americans having now declared war at the end of turn 3. And as we know, turn 4 involves a lot more action. Here it comes. Well, halfway through turn 4, the big turn, and you'll already see some more rising sun flags than you're used to seeing. And that's because this was the turn that everybody breaks out, and Japan's plans went, Japan's roles and battles went according to plan. So we've been eyeing the naval balance here in the Pacific, and the odds were just too in Japan's favor there at this one turn, at this one opportunity to not take advantage of. So we came in, we lost an awful lot. But that's what we got left after the Pearl Harbor attack in the Pacific. So that gives us, for the moment, a good position on top in that theater. Having also declared war on the rest of the Allied powers, we've cleaned up, speaking of cleaning up, Kwantung and Malaya in order to take out bonuses there for both India and Anzac. That helps. We've now completed the conquest of China, which gives us a nice +6 in IPCs. And essentially all of our Air Force still remaining, which is helpful. And on the German front, they've continued to push forward. The Russians have continued to strategically reallocate, and they're now huddled in Moscow, where they're building a very tough nut that no one's going to crack anytime soon. But the Germans are sure as heck going to try. Meanwhile, though, the doors are open for the Allies to just start flooding in to the Atlantic on turn 4. Well, we've reached turn 5, and as always, the yen has yanged, and the Allies have sprung back from Japan's breakout. So, as was to be expected, the Anzacistanis responded by wiping out what was left in Hawaii, and the U.S. dumped a build into the Pacific. So, I mean, that's helpful. That's still taking some pressure off of Germany. It's still a trade that was very much worth making. We're not holding that token that we won for getting rid of all surface warships in the Pacific rather. But fortunately, Japan does still have that technology. It rolled nautical engineering, which reduces the cost of its ships. And that's going to be helpful as we expand out into the Pacific again. Australia still making too much money, but a little less since we took Malaya. Unfortunately, we stretched in a wrong way left the transports in 36 under defended. We left a destroyer there. It got taken out by the Philippine plane. So our focus was on the Anzac Navy. Philippine plane snuck in there, got a shot in, took out 2 transports, which really crimps our expansion style over there, and that's unfortunate. But life goes on. On the European map, the Allies look a lot better. The Atlantic Fleet has come into 91. It's building out like crazy in Egypt. This is just a stupid amount of naval units here on either end of the Mediterranean. Italy's catastrophic first turn, second turn, just, scripted that one with the Allies just coming in and eating its lunch. And they are geared up for an invasion here. So Axis have some work to do to guard against that here on the upcoming turn. Halfway through turn 5, the Japanese recovering from their Filipino debacle last time by this time taking the Philippines, had to devote all of the transport capacity we had to do that, but it was necessary to get rid of that plane and establish some control in that sea zone. Still weren't able to build transports out of Quang-Si down here. Had to build them out of Japan to be safe, but we've reinforced our destroyer fleet against the subs that are down here. We're moving forward, but the progress isn't quite as fast as it would have been. Nevertheless, we're moving forward. The other thing to note about Japan is that they have, we're going to flip these guys here, Mongolia, because we've just activated the Mongolian role in order to gobble up that much more of the Russian capacity. And speaking of Russian capacity, we've taken these factories here. We're going to have to throw some damage on that factory, but we'll take care of that. So that's what happened in the Japanese turn, continuing to invade and ingress into the Russian territories. The Germans also making their way in towards Moscow with taking Ukraine and also the mech stack and tank stack down in Rostov, having swung around to the south there to gobble up those territories. Russia pushing back a little bit here in Archangel, and those stacks kind of taking the long way around to avoid the Japanese up top from Siberia. And the rest of Germany, we've built up infantry, knowing that we need to reinforce our defenses against potential coastal invasions by the U.S. and the UK. By the beginning of turn 6, things have shaped up pretty dramatically. Not so much on the Pacific side. We have some predictable multinational naval buildup here in Hawaii. Some less predictable occupation of the Fijian sea zone for reasons that remain to unfold. And continued Anzac investment in submarines. Now, they did pull off a nasty little invasion of Malaya and were able to retake that, which is frustrating from a Japanese perspective. Hopefully not too outcome determinative. The Indians have aroused and removed themselves from their hidey hole and are now coming up at the bottom of China for Japan to now contemplate what they'll do about it. The real dramatic action is, as one may have anticipated, here in Europe. So given the position of Europe's Air Force, that kind of led the Allies to plunge themselves into southern Europe with every last thing that could go in terms of land units, air units, everything else, all this stuff that had been piling up in Africa and Gibraltar and Egypt and all these things up until this point. Now, you'll see some blow-up boxes here for the land and the sea zones. Those are over here. Now, this is reduced because what the Italians have done is thrown everything that they could at that pile in southern France, which was a couple tanks, all of their Air Force, and a couple paratroopers. we're able to whittle down 5 infantry off of that stack. And that's the stack that remains, which is still an awfully intimidating one, and certainly the Navy's enormous there in Season 93. Now, though, on the beginning of turn 6, it's up to the Germans to avenge that Italian loss while continuing to lay the pressure down on Moscow. Halfway through turn 6, Japan has just completed, and it's a bit of repositioning. The Navy that was down in the Philippines has come and kind of rejoined the Season 6 crew with some new purchases, because we got to keep this Hawaiian fleet in mind. We also have to keep more immediately the submarine fleet in mind that Anzac's now spreading all over the sea. That said, pleased with what Japan was able to grab hold of down here, which includes 3 of the 4 Money Islands. Finally, on turn 6, we're getting some of that income. We also took out that transport and dropped some land units, reassembled some land units, kind of reoriented all around the Indian invasion down south to anticipate and deal with that. These planes are over here because they came this way to help mop up more of the newly communized Mongolian reinforcements that were coming this way. But more importantly, the big news of the turn is Vologda here is empty. This is where those 12 Siberian guys and 2 AA guns had marched all the way over here. And on the next turn, we're imminently about to join Moscow. 6 of them already made it. But the Japanese Air Force came and were able to eliminate those. The Strat bombers over there. The remaining planes are here. That is a significantly weaker Japanese Air Force that's left, but I think that they've contributed mightily to the cause. We're now building Japanese folks in Stalingrad. We've got a nice little size of Japanese forces coming in the Caucasus, pairing up with the Germans. So the Germans here, on their turn, had positioned, and rather aggressively, I might add, building mechs in Ukraine, and folks putting all their Air Force here in Leningrad to put themselves in the most aggressive position to threaten Moscow that they could manage. And that still remains. We have this, yet to see what comes of that. Russia, of course, logically hurtling Moscow with every single person that could come back there as a result. Reason Germany's able to project that power, though, is how this battle went. You'll recall that the Italians sacrificed every unit they could get into southern France, including their entire Air Force. And that was only based on the promise of the Germans to follow suit and try and take out the remaining land forces. Fortunately, they were able to do that, and that's what's left down there. That roll went pretty well. I mean, the odds were in the favor, but fortunately, we stuck with the odds this time and didn't whiff. So, Axis were able to chase the Allies completely off the continent. That's not to say that the threat is abated. There is certainly a large number of Americans both in Gibraltar and waiting to join them. And there is still an enormous fleet in the Atlantic, just hordes and hordes of ships. Sorry, my bad. But yeah, that's where they are, Season 93. A few back there in the Red Sea as well. So all is not quiet on the Western Front. And we'll see how noisy it gets on the rest of turn 6. Well, it's beginning around 7. The Americans have retrenched back to Season 10, while the Anzakistanis came back to their homeland. A whole lot of subs continuing to pollute the Southern Pacific and mess up my pretty little island collection. In China's actually back on the board with 1 IPC, thanks to the Indian stack emerging from Calcutta. Japanese kind of reorienting to contend with that. On the European map, the British are getting a little bit nervous about their Middle East bonus with all those Japanese knocking down the door in Caucasus, but nevertheless, continuing to own the Med and industrialize it all around. There's a military base there now in Algeria, thanks to the Americans. And once again, the Americans come back to southern France. This battle actually went quite a bit better for them. They actually didn't lose a single piece, thanks to the amazing rolling of the Germans. And instead of doing the 1-2 punch, Italy decided, you know what, this is the last turn I'm going to get to buy anything, so why don't I just turtle in Rome and see how long that lasts me. And in the meantime, the Allied fleet come up, completing its grip on the Italian boot and convoying that to death. Italy did still manage to collect 6 somehow, but that blow-up box there represents a growing fleet of Allied pieces, just owning that naval area with dominance. And so if Germany's going to do anything, it better be soon. Halfway through turn 7, the Japanese, with no American designs, have done some builds but moved its navy southward. Why that sea zone specifically? Why are there no planes on the carriers? Well, that's because we chose to make our stand here in Kwangsi and put up a fight against the incoming Indians. You'll see now Japanese infantry spread out everywhere. It's almost like a reverse Chinese situation where they are little blocker infantry groups, just like the Chinese are most of the game. So that's interesting, but the Chinese are back on the map now. One territory occupied by the Indians, giving them some IPCs. The Japanese also upgraded this factory to a major and built there. In retrospect, 1 turn later than I wish they would have, because that big move into the Caucasus, that was too many units put into the Caucasus, and now they're out of position. They could have been knocking on Moscow this turn instead, which incidentally is exactly what the Japanese who were in position did, including all of the Air Force. So all those air units, the bomber, 2 bombers, trap bombers, the several planes and tac bombers, all came in for a last-ditch effort to whittle down the Russians, and were able to take out 5. They took out 5. Those were pretty good hits, which helps tremendously because Germany has gambled it all on going into Moscow next turn with its buys of 3 tanks and 3 strat bombers right here. The odds of going into Moscow this turn were in the 30s somewhere, and that wasn't good enough. But it's going to be a now or never situation, not necessarily because of Russia. I mean, we'll continue to build up. Russia's making 5 IPCs a turn now, so in the long run, we would outspend them and get over the curve that way. The problem is there isn't a long run to be had because we're going back and forth in Europe with the Allies. We did that again, and frankly, again, rolls went better than I could have hoped in southern France because now there's 11 guys in there. They all attacked at a 1, though, because they didn't bring any air support. That said, this can't last forever, right? Germany chose not to build anything in the mainland this time around and put it all onto the Russian front. So it's signaling that, that's what is the plan. That's where Germany is all in this turn. So unless there's something that the Allies can do to upset that plan, we expect to see that on turn 8. Let's see how the rest of turn 7 goes. Well, it's the beginning of round 8, and it's going to be the last round due to time restrictions once more. We've now played a almost full 2 days, but sadly, the Labor Day weekend is coming to a close. Planes need to be caught, so we'll likely not even finish round 8. Here's where we stand at the beginning. Americans being a little squirrely there just because they can, just because Japan moved south. The Anzac-Astani is also consolidating the Navy, but doing what little they can down there. The Indians doing even less, just kind of turtling into that little zone that they've intruded into and forcing the Japanese to deal with them. UK and US just staying the course, filling the med with industrialization and more units. Where'd you end up building those air bases, Chris?
Here and in Scotland.
You built air bases in Gibraltar and Scotland.
Upgraded the strips.
Upgraded the strips.
Why did I do that?
So he can shoot rockets, because we forgot to mention last video that he, by finally conquering Africa, got a victory token, rolled the technology, got rockets, so that's why you see smoke tokens all over Europe. He's just shooting rockets everywhere at all the German facilities, and they are duly up in smoke. So again, you've already saw that the reason there's no Germany pieces on the board is because they're all over there. And so that's what it's going to come down to on the rest of this turn, is how this German invasion goes in round 8 into Moscow. This will be, if it happens, this will be the last victory city and its own victory city. I think taking Moscow as a victory token as well, right? So that's 2 tokens if I take Moscow. Not to mention a capital, and realistically, even if we were to play out the game, realistically, that would probably be the decisive blow. So let's throw some dice. And there it is, folks. That's what remains after the invasion of Moscow. The odds calculator had me at high 80s, low 90s, and it didn't go that way. Russia had some pretty good rolls, pretty extremely good rolls. Germany started off with some bad ones, which no doubt tilted the odds in Russia's favor there on out. So we didn't even do buys or other movements. We're running out of time, so we just did this battle. This is the way that it rolled. This is the way the dice roll sometime. Now, keep in mind, Russia is making a grand total of 3 IPCs a turn now, so they're not building anything new. Japan, even though it could have positioned its ground units a little bit more effectively, nevertheless has a decent amount of ground units, including tanks, sitting there, and a major factory that it upgraded just 2 spaces away. So it has the ability to put some pressure on Moscow as well, all by itself, even without German help. Germany is certainly not going to push into Moscow anymore. Were we to continue the game, there would be some builds here. There would be builds in, they would all go in Germany, of course. Next turn, Allies would liberate Paris, right? It doesn't matter. I could build 5 things there. Between them, they're eventually going to do that at some point on turn 8. So that's a big deal for them. And from there, do they take Germany? I mean, eventually, better than even odds, I'd say. Italy's turtled up. I don't know what they would do, Chris. What order would you take that in?
I mean, I do think I'd take Paris for the bonus and then start, trying to reinforce in there. I'd have to sit down and look at it. I mean, Italy's getting strangled, so they're not getting any more units down here without significant help. Mm-hmm. We've got 12, 14 guys coming every turn now, I think. So I don't think it would be long before, I'd obviously clean up that factory in Southern, help be building out of there, could upgrade it even. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd probably I would probably take Northern to be a pain in your ass, just to make sure you couldn't jut up and try to do something with fast movers, although you don't have very many of them. You only got 1. I think I'm worried about Germany, not about Italy right now. So probably Germany is the answer. I'm just gonna rocket the thing to death.
Yeah.
Rockets for the MVP when you're the UK.
I mean, they're nice. They came too late to really make an impact in the game. I never needed to build out of any of those factories.
Oh, you kind of do now.
Well, I do, yeah, and that would certainly make a difference. But again, we haven't done any builds. We haven't done any non-coms. We don't know what the situation is going to look like. You don't have, a ton there, but this is your third attempt to land there, and this is the first one that's going to stick. But you are, both shucking and shucking. And so there's going to be a consistent flow of guys come in. Like you said, you're going to fix that factory and build stuff. The momentum clearly favors the Allies now on the German map. And with this much left, this is 7 tanks, 6 planes, all the British planes that no longer need to be there, so they're going to fly off. Yeah, and the Japanese have their hands full trying to take that. India is not doing much. We could potentially do something there, but that's a lot for Japan to take care of all by itself when Germany's doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, particularly when you have, I'm not doing, threatening you up there, right? But, you can't just let that sit there either.
No, I've got to do a whole naval build now because I didn't build a naval base down yonder to bring my Navy back to ward off the Americans. And that's fine. I need those guys kind of down there dealing with those subs. And so maybe I build a naval base now, and between the two navies, we still have a wall there that you're not going to get past, but you're not trying to get past it. You're there to make me spend. So that's it. We end the game with no victory, but I'd say advantage Allies at this point.
That's all because of the bad early. You said it earlier. When your luck hits is everything, and your luck hit later, and the bad luck in the early rolls is all. You have just for example, 65 something ones. I think you have 9 hits or something. Something absurd. 8
right,
hits.
Right, exactly. Out of 65 ones, 9 hits. That's pathetic. And that's. It came. We played for 2 days, and the entire game came down to a game of Yahtzee.
Well, to be fair, the strategy that you was to play a game of Yahtzee at the end for the whole kit and caboodle. That's sort of it was Russia or bust. If you took Russia, I agree. I think it's strong advantage Axis.
Yeah, for sure.
Take it, then you're hurting for certain.
For sure. If that Moscow battle had gone differently, that'd been a solid Axis win, I would call.
If you had moved those guys from Kazakhstan to Samara, waited one turn before you sent that Navy in, and then strafed them with a little bit more, that's probably the difference. That's my guess.
Could have been.
Good strategy, though. Really, really strong.
It went well, and I was happy with it. And I got to give credit to my teammates. Both Roman and Ferris had critical decisions and input on the strategy throughout the game, and they stuck with it the whole game. So this was definitely a team effort on the Axis side.
Simone, excellent work. Brian is good on the dice, so I kind of like it.
Yeah, so we have successfully trained a new generation of Axis players and given them some real-world experience, and that can only pay off in the future. All right, signing out.